The coffin was already being lowered when the scream cut through the cemetery. "Stop!" Every head turned. Rain-soaked mourners froze mid-prayer. The priest's hands trembled above the holy book. 6 men gripping the ropes looked up in confusion as a young man in a dirt-stained jacket ran toward the grave, his breath ragged, his eyes burning with certainty. "She's not dead," he shouted. "You're about to bury her alive." Gasps rippled through the crowd. The man was just a cemetery groundskeeper. No suit, no authority, no right to interrupt a funeral for a wealthy woman whose name echoed across the city. Evelyn Carter, 32, declared dead after a sudden illness. Death certificate signed, case closed, or so everyone believed. "Get him out of here," a sharp male voice snapped. Evelyn's husband stepped forward. Black suit, perfect posture. Not a tear on his face. His jaw tightened as he stared at the groundskeeper like an insect that had crawled onto silk. "This is a funeral," he said coldly. "You're sick. Someone call security." The groundskeeper didn't slow down. "I clean this place every day," he said, voice shaking but loud. "I know what death looks like, and this," he pointed at the coffin, "this isn't it." 2 guards grabbed his arms. "Wait," someone from the crowd whispered. Then another voice. Then another. "What if he's right?" Evelyn's mother collapsed into a chair, clutching her chest. "Please," she sobbed, just open it." Her husband's eyes flashed not with grief but with something darker. "No," he said instantly, too fast, too firm. "You will not desecrate my wife's body because of a lunatic." The groundskeeper twisted free just long enough to shout one final sentence. Her heart didn't stop. It was slowed. Poison can do that. Silence slammed down like thunder. The priest hesitated, the ropes creaked. Then, barely noticeable but real thump. The coffin shifted, not much, just enough. A scream tore through the crowd. The guards froze. The husband stepped back, color draining from his face for the first time. "That's impossible," he whispered. Another sound followed, a faint scratch, from inside the coffin. Chaos exploded. "Open it, dear God, call an ambulance." The groundskeeper dropped to his knees beside the coffin, hands shaking. "She doesn't have much time," he said. "Whatever they gave her, it wears off. Then it kills." The husband lunged forward. "Touch that coffin and I'll sue every one of you into the ground." But the crowd had turned. Fear is louder than money. The lid was forced open, and what they saw inside would haunt them forever. Evelyn's lips trembled, her fingers twitched, and then she gasped. If this moment shocked you, stay with this story till the end, because what happened next exposed a lie so dark it destroyed an entire family. Follow and keep watching so you don't miss the next part, because part 2 reveals who wanted Evelyn dead and why. As sirens wailed in the distance, Evelyn's husband whispered something no grieving man should ever say, and the groundskeeper heard every word. The sirens were still far away when the groundskeeper heard it. "They ruined everything," Evelyn's husband muttered. Not cried, not prayed, muttered. The words slipped out when everyone else was focused on the coffin, on Evelyn's shallow, uneven breaths, on the paramedics rushing forward, on the miracle unraveling in front of their eyes. But the groundskeeper was watching him, up close, too close, and what he saw didn't match a man who had just gotten his wife back from the dead. There was no relief in his eyes, only panic. Evelyn was lifted from the coffin, rain soaking her pale skin as oxygen was pressed to her face. Her chest rose weakly, like she was fighting water in her lungs. People cried openly now. Some prayed. Others backed away as if resurrection itself were contagious. The husband stood frozen. "Sir," a paramedic said sharply, "we need space." He didn't move. His gaze was locked on Evelyn's wrist, on the faint purple mark just above it, half hidden beneath the sleeve of her burial dress. The groundskeeper followed his stare. That wasn't from illness, he thought. That was from being held down. As they carried Evelyn toward the ambulance, her eyes fluttered open for the first time, confused, terrified. Her lips moved. "Eli," she whispered. The groundskeeper stopped breathing. That wasn't her husband's name. The husband heard it too, his face hardened. "She's delirious," he said quickly, stepping forward. The doctor said that would happen. Trauma. Hallucinations. What doctor? The groundskeeper asked before he could stop himself. The husband turned slowly. Excuse me. You said she was sick for weeks, the groundskeeper continued. But I work nights. I saw her walking here just 3 days ago, laughing, healthy. A flicker of rage crossed the husband's face, then vanished. You're done, he said quietly. You've caused enough damage today. Security finally moved in, pushing the groundskeeper back as the ambulance doors slammed shut. The sirens wailed louder now, swallowing the cemetery in sound. But the groundskeeper wasn't finished listening. As the ambulance pulled away, Evelyn's husband took out his phone with shaking hands. I told you not to rush it, he hissed into the call. She wasn't supposed to wake up yet. A pause, then more venom. No, I don't care what you said about the dosage. You promised it would look natural. The groundskeeper felt his stomach drop. Promised. The call ended. The husband turned and froze when he saw the groundskeeper still standing there, staring straight at him. For a split second, their eyes locked. In that moment, the truth passed between them like a blade. You didn't hear anything, the husband said calmly. The groundskeeper took a step back. I heard enough. That night, long after the cemetery emptied and the rain washed the mud from the grave, the groundskeeper sat alone in his small apartment, replaying the day over and over. The scratch from inside the coffin, the slowed heartbeat, the purple mark, the phone call. This wasn't an accident, it was a plan, and someone powerful wanted it buried. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Message. Stop asking questions if you value your life. The groundskeeper stared at the screen, his hands cold. Because now he understood something terrifying. Saving Evelyn once was easy. Keeping her alive would be much harder. What the groundskeeper didn't know yet was that the hospital Evelyn was taken to was owned by her husband's family. The hospital lights were too bright. Evelyn felt it before she understood it, the sharp sting in her eyes, the chemical smell, the steady beeping that told her she was still alive. Her body felt heavy, like it didn't fully belong to her yet. She tried to move. Pain answered. Easy, a calm voice said. You're safe now. Safe. The word echoed strangely in her mind. She turned her head and saw her husband sitting beside the bed, hands folded, face carved into the perfect image of concern. His eyes softened when he noticed she was awake. Evelyn, he breathed, thank God you scared us. Her throat was dry. The coffin, she whispered. I couldn't move, I could hear everything. His hand tightened around hers just a little too hard. That's just the medication talking, he said gently. The doctor explained it. Your heart rate dropped dangerously low. You imagine the rest. She stared at him. Images flooded back, darkness, pressure, the sound of dirt hitting wood, her lungs screaming while her body refused to obey. That wasn't imagination, she said. A knock interrupted them. A tall man in a white coat entered, reading from a chart without looking up. Mrs. Carter, I'm Dr. Harlan, you're very lucky. Evelyn noticed something immediately. He didn't introduce himself to her. He didn't ask how she felt. And when he finally looked up, his eyes flicked not to her face, but to her husband, like he was checking for permission. You suffered a rare neurological episode, the doctor continued. It mimics death, extremely convincing, happens once in a million cases. Will it happen again? Evelyn asked. The doctor hesitated just a fraction of a second. No, her husband answered for him. Of course not. Evelyn's heart began to race. I want a different doctor, she said suddenly, and I want my mother. Her husband's smile didn't reach his eyes. Let's not overwhelm you. You need rest. I'm not resting, she said, pulling her hand away. I want answers. That night when the machines hummed and the hallway outside her room went quiet, Evelyn pretended to sleep. She felt it then. A cool sensation spreading up her arm, her eyes snapped open. A syringe. The doctor stood over her bed, gloved hand steady. What are you doing? She gasped, trying to scream, but her voice came out weak. Helping you, he said calmly. You're agitated, this will slow things down. No, the door opened. Her husband stepped inside. Is it done? He asked. Evelyn's blood ran cold. She's resisting, the doctor replied, but the dose is adjusted. This time there won't be a mistake. Mistake. Evelyn's vision blurred as the drug burned through her veins. Her husband leaned close, his voice low and finally honest. "You were never supposed to wake up," he whispered. "You saw something you shouldn't have." Her last clear thought before darkness swallowed her was a terrifying realization. The coffin wasn't the end. It was only the first attempt. While Evelyn was being sedated again, the groundskeeper was standing in the hospital parking lot, holding proof that could get him killed. The groundskeeper sat in his car across the street from the hospital, engine off, lights dark, heart pounding like it was trying to warn him. This place looked clean, safe, respectable, and that was exactly what terrified him. Earlier that evening, he had done something he'd never done before. Broken into the staff-only maintenance wing he used to clean years ago, back when this hospital still outsourced night crews. Most people didn't know there was an old service corridor behind the emergency wing. Even fewer remembered the forgotten security office tucked at the end of it. But he did, because that's where the cameras used to feed. The flash drive now felt heavier than metal in his pocket. Inside it, archived footage the hospital thought no one could access anymore. Footage from 3 nights ago. He replayed it on his phone, hands trembling. Evelyn, walking into the hospital late at night, alone, not sick, not weak, laughing at something her husband said as they entered the private elevator together. Time stamp, 11:42 p.m. Then the next clip, Evelyn lying on a gurney, motionless, a doctor adjusting an IV. Her husband standing close, too close, watching every movement. Time stamp, 12:09 a.m., 27 minutes. That's all it took. The groundskeeper swallowed hard. He had also noticed something else. A name. Dr. Harlan wasn't just any doctor. He was listed as a consultant, paid through a shell foundation connected directly to the Carter family's estate. This wasn't just murder. It was organized. The groundskeeper's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. This time it wasn't a threat. It was a location pin. Attached message: "If you have something that doesn't belong to you, bring it back, or we bring the ground to you." He looked up at the hospital windows. One room on the third floor had its lights on. Evelyn's room. At that exact moment, Evelyn drifted in and out of consciousness, her body fighting the drug flooding her veins. She heard voices through the fog. "Increase the dosage. Heart rate is dropping." Her fingers twitched weakly. Somewhere deep inside her, panic screamed, but her body refused to listen. The doctor leaned over her again. "This time," he murmured, "you won't feel a thing." Back in the parking lot, the groundskeeper made a decision that would change everything. He didn't go inside. He didn't call the police. Instead, he drove straight to the one person who hated the Carter family more than anyone else. A woman who had lost her medical license years ago after accusing them of bribery. A woman no one believed. When he reached her door just before dawn, he held up the flash drive with shaking hands. "They tried to bury her alive," he said, "and they're trying again." The woman stared at the drive. Then she smiled, not with happiness but with grim satisfaction. "I told them this day would come," she said, "and now we're not going to save her quietly." She turned toward her desk, already reaching for a phone. "We're going to burn them." What neither of them knew was that Evelyn's husband had already given the final order, and this time he planned to watch her die. Evelyn's heart rate dipped again. The monitor let out a long, uneven beep that made the nurse stiffen. She glanced at the chart, then at Dr. Harlan, who stood at the foot of the bed with his arms crossed. "Should we call ICU?" the nurse asked. Dr. Harlan didn't answer. He looked at the man standing beside the window instead. Evelyn's husband watched the city lights below like he was admiring a view from a penthouse, not deciding the fate of a woman who had shared his bed for 7 years. "Stabilize her," the nurse insisted. "She's not responding normally." Now he turned. "No ICU," he said calmly. "She signed a DNR." The nurse blinked. "That's not in her file." "It's in mine," he replied, pulling out a folder. "Private directive." Dr. Harlan took it without question. Evelyn tried to speak. Nothing came out. Her body felt like it was sinking, heavy, distant, slipping away from her control. Panic roared inside her mind, trapped behind paralyzed muscles. She heard her husband step closer. "This didn't have to be ugly," he said softly, almost tender. "If you'd stayed quiet, you would have gone peacefully." Her eyes burned with tears that wouldn't fall. He leaned down close enough that only she could hear. "You saw the accounts," he whispered. "The transfers, the offshore names. You were going to ruin everything." So it was true. He straightened and nodded at the doctor. "Finish it." Dr. Harlan hesitated, just for a second. That second saved her life. Because miles away, in a dimly lit office that smelled of old books and cold coffee, Dr. Mara Ellison slammed her fist on the desk. "He used the same drug," she said. "The same delivery method. Slows the heart, mimics death, clears the system fast." The groundskeeper stood across from her, eyes hollow. "Can you prove it?" She plugged the flash drive into her computer. The footage played, her jaw tightened. "This man destroyed my career," she said quietly, "and now he thinks he's untouchable." She picked up her phone and dialed. "Patch me into emergency oversight," she said. "Yes, now. And record everything." Back in the hospital room, the nurse adjusted the IV. Evelyn felt cold spread through her chest. Her vision narrowed. Dr. Harlan raised the syringe. Then the door burst open. "Step away from the patient." A voice echoed with authority. Two hospital administrators stormed in, followed by a woman in a dark coat holding up her phone, recording. "Dr. Harlan," the woman said, "you're under investigation for malpractice, falsifying records, and attempted homicide." The syringe clattered to the floor. Evelyn's husband froze. "What is this?" he snapped. "Do you have any idea who I am?" "Yes," the woman replied, "and so does the state medical board, and the police who are on their way." Sirens wailed outside again. This time they were coming for him. Evelyn gasped deep, real air, her body finally fighting back as the IV was ripped out. Her husband backed away, eyes wild. "This isn't over," he hissed. But for the first time, Evelyn saw fear crack through his perfect control. As handcuffs clicked shut in the hallway, Evelyn remembered something crucial, something she'd seen before she was poisoned. And it proved this conspiracy went far beyond her husband. The hospital room felt different once the sirens faded. Quieter, heavier. Evelyn lay still as doctors hovered around her, adjusting machines, checking vitals, speaking in urgent but hopeful tones. Her lungs finally obeyed her. Her fingers moved. Her heart beat strong enough to be undeniable. Alive. Yet her mind was racing somewhere far more dangerous. Because as the drugs cleared from her system, a memory rose to the surface, sharp, unwelcome, impossible to ignore. She had seen something. Not at the hospital, not at the cemetery, before everything, 2 weeks earlier. Evelyn remembered standing in her husband's private study late at night, searching for a document he'd asked her to file. The room smelled of expensive leather and whiskey. The safe behind the painting was open, careless, like he never expected anyone to look. She hadn't meant to snoop, but the folder inside wasn't subtle. Medical investments. Inside were names. Hospitals, research labs, private clinics, and beside them payments. Large ones, some labeled consulting, others labeled silence. One name had stood out, Dr. Harlan. Another had terrified her, Mara Ellison. A note was scribbled beside it in her husband's handwriting. Handled. License revoked. Evelyn remembered the chill that ran through her then. The way she'd quietly closed the safe, pretending she'd never seen it. The next morning she had confronted him, not angrily, cautiously. "I saw something strange in your office," she'd said. His smile that day had been the same smile he wore at her funeral, controlled, empty. That was the day he decided she had to die. Back in the hospital, Evelyn turned her head slowly. The door creaked open. The groundskeeper stepped inside, looking painfully out of place among the machines and white coats. When their eyes met, recognition flared. "You," she whispered. He nodded. "You remember." "Yes," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "And I remember why." He pulled a chair closer but didn't sit. "Dr. Ellison is working with state investigators. What you know matters." Evelyn swallowed. My husband wasn't just trying to kill me, he's done this before. The groundskeeper's jaw tightened. Other patients, she nodded weakly. People who saw too much, people who asked questions, deaths ruled natural, accidents, heart failures. The door opened again. This time, a uniformed detective entered, notebook already in hand. "Mrs. Carter," he said gently, "we believe your husband was part of a larger network, bribing doctors, manipulating medical records, using poison to fake natural deaths." Evelyn met his eyes. "I can prove it," she said. "The safe, the documents, the payments." The detective exhaled slowly. Then this case just got a lot bigger. Across town, in a holding room that smelled of metal and disinfectant, Evelyn's husband sat alone, wrists cuffed, staring at the floor. He wasn't angry, he was calculating. A phone buzzed in his pocket, missed calls he couldn't answer. He looked up when the door opened. A man he didn't recognize stepped inside, expensive suit, no badge. "You failed," the man said calmly. "I didn't," Evelyn's husband replied. "She's still alive." The man smiled thinly. "Then fix it." The door closed, and for the first time Evelyn's husband realized the truth. He wasn't the one in control anymore. What Evelyn didn't know yet was that the men backing her husband were already planning their next move. And this time, she was the target in plain sight. Evelyn's hospital room was no longer just a place to recover. It was a liability. By morning, 2 uniformed officers stood outside her door. A camera appeared in the hallway. Nurses whispered more than usual. Every screen in the city seemed to carry a version of the same headline. "Woman declared dead wakes up at her own funeral." The story spread like wildfire, and with it, danger. Dr. Mara Ellison stood near the window, arms crossed, watching reporters gather across the street. "They didn't want this quiet," she said. "If they did, you wouldn't still be breathing." Evelyn shifted in the bed, unease crawling up her spine. "Then why am I still alive?" "Because killing you now would raise questions they can't control," the detective replied. "You're safer as a spectacle than a body, safer." The word felt hollow. Across town, in a glass-walled conference room high above the city, 6 people sat in silence. No names were spoken. No phones allowed on the table. Evelyn's husband sat at the far end. "You assured us this was contained," a woman finally said, her voice sharp. "One patient, one doctor, clean." "It was," he replied, "until a groundskeeper got curious." "Then improvise," another man said coldly. "Accidents happen. Even miracles fade." Back in the hospital, Evelyn's phone buzzed. A private message request. No name, no profile picture, just text. "You should have stayed dead." Her hands trembled. Dr. Ellison leaned in. "What is it?" "They know I'm awake," Evelyn whispered, "and they're not afraid anymore." That afternoon, a nurse Evelyn had never seen before entered the room, pushing a cart. "I'm here to take you for imaging," she said without looking up. The detective frowned. "That's not scheduled." The nurse paused just long enough. Evelyn's pulse spiked. The groundskeeper stepped forward instinctively. "What department?" The nurse's eyes flicked to the door, too fast. Dr. Ellison grabbed the cart and yanked it back. A syringe rolled free. The room erupted. The nurse bolted. Officers chased her down the hallway as alarms blared. Evelyn pressed a hand to her mouth, shaking. "They're trying again," she said. "They won't stop." That night, under emergency orders, Evelyn was moved. No announcement. No ambulance lights. A quiet transfer to a secure medical wing run by federal oversight. As they wheeled her down a back corridor, Evelyn stared at the ceiling, realizing something terrifying. Her life now depended on staying visible. Hidden was deadly, but exposure was dangerous too. When they reached the elevator, Dr. Ellison leaned close. "Tomorrow, you testify, on record, everything you know." Evelyn closed her eyes. Testifying meant war. Miles away, a man opened a laptop and watched a live news feed of the hospital. He turned to someone sitting in the shadows. "She's becoming a symbol," he said, "and symbols inspire people." The shadowed figure nodded. "Then we don't make her a martyr." "How?" The man smiled. "We make her a liar." The next morning, a leaked document hit the internet. one that claimed Evelyn Carter had faked her own death for money. The document went viral before Evelyn even woke up. By the time sunlight filtered through the reinforced windows of the secure medical wing, her name was no longer tied to survival or miracle. It was tied to fraud. Leaked report. Evelyn Carter orchestrated a staged death to access offshore assets hidden under false medical claims. The file looked official. Hospital seals, legal language, signatures that mimicked authority perfectly, and worst of all, a video. Evelyn watched it from the hospital bed, her stomach turning as her own face stared back at her from the screen. The footage showed her walking into the hospital calmly, smiling, signing a form, a timestamp in the corner. The caption beneath it burned, "Not sick, not dying, planning." "That's edited," Evelyn whispered. "I never signed that." "We know," the detective said grimly, "but the public doesn't." Outside, the crowd had changed. The same people who had called her a miracle 2 days earlier now shouted different words. "Liar! Arrest her! Rich people always get away with it." Dr. Ellison shut off the screen. "This is classic misdirection. They muddy the truth until no one knows what to believe." Evelyn felt tears sting her eyes. "They're rewriting my life. They're trying to isolate you," the groundskeeper said. "If people stop trusting you, your testimony loses power." And that was the point. Across the city, Evelyn's husband watched the chaos unfold from a quiet room, hands clasped, expression calm for the first time since his arrest. "She won't last," he said to the man beside him. "She never could handle pressure." The man didn't look at him. Pressure creates clarity or collapse. Back in the secure wing, Evelyn's mother was denied entry. "Public safety," they said. When Evelyn heard, something inside her hardened. "They can't keep controlling the story," she said. "If I stay silent, I lose." Dr. Ellison studied her. "If you speak now, they'll tear you apart." "Then let them," Evelyn replied. "At least it'll be my voice." That evening, against every recommendation, Evelyn sat in front of a camera. No filters, no script, just truth. "My name is Evelyn Carter," she began, her voice shaking but clear. "I was pronounced dead. I was placed in a coffin while still alive, and someone wanted me buried." The video streamed live. She spoke about the safe, the documents, the doctor, the second attempt in the hospital, the messages. She held nothing back. When she finished, the room was silent. Within minutes, reactions flooded in. Some supportive, some vicious, some uncertain. But doubt had cracked the lie. Then the detective's phone rang. His face darkened as he listened. "They've issued a warrant," he said slowly. "For who?" Evelyn asked. He met her eyes. "For you, on charges of conspiracy and fraud." Evelyn exhaled sharply. "So this is how they do it?" "Yes," he said. "They can't kill you. So they bury you legally." As officers stepped forward to escort her, Evelyn realized the cruel symmetry. First, a coffin. Now a cell. And somewhere deep in the system, the people behind it all were smiling. As Evelyn was taken into custody, a single file finished decrypting on Dr. Ellison's computer, one that proved the leaked document was forged, and named the person who ordered it. The cell was colder than Evelyn expected. Not just the concrete walls or the steel bench, but the silence. The kind that presses in on your ears and forces your thoughts to get louder. She wrapped her arms around herself and stared at the floor. Fraud, conspiracy, faking her own death. The irony almost made her laugh. Across the city, Dr. Mara Ellison leaned toward her laptop as lines of code finally stopped moving. The decryption bar hit 100%. "There," she whispered. The file opened. It wasn't a report. It wasn't medical. It was a payment ledger, encrypted, layered, deliberately hidden beneath hospital billing software. Names scrolled down the screen. Doctors, administrators, private investigators, and then highlighted in red, media consultants. "This wasn't just about killing her," Dr. Ellison said. "It was about controlling the aftermath." The groundskeeper stood behind her, fists clenched. "Can you trace it?" She nodded slowly. "Yes, and whoever did this was arrogant." She clicked one final folder. Inside was a contract, a digital signature, a familiar name, Evelyn Carter's husband. Under it, a single instruction line: if subject survives, initiate credibility collapse. Dr. Ellison exhaled sharply. They planned for resurrection. Back in the holding facility, Evelyn was led into a small interview room. No cameras, no windows. A man in a gray suit sat waiting, hands folded neatly. "I'm not your lawyer," he said calmly, "and I'm not here to accuse you." "Then why am I here?" Evelyn asked. He slid a tablet across the table, on the screen her live confession video. The comment section scrolled endlessly, half belief, half hatred. "You see this?" the man said. "Truth doesn't win by being true, it wins by being provable." Evelyn swallowed. "I can prove it." He studied her carefully. "Then you'd better do it fast. Because your husband's legal team is pushing for a closed hearing. If that happens, the narrative freezes." The door opened suddenly. A uniformed officer leaned in. "You need to see this, now." In the hallway, a television played breaking news. Leaked hospital files suggest evidence against Evelyn Carter was fabricated. The anchor's voice trembled with urgency. Sources confirm the documents accusing Carter of fraud were digitally forged. The alleged origin of the leak traces back to accounts linked to her husband's private holdings. Evelyn felt her knees weaken. Dr. Ellison appeared on screen next, calm, precise, unstoppable. "We have timestamps, payment trails, and signed directives," she said. "This was a coordinated attempt to discredit a murder victim who survived." The room erupted in noise. Phones rang. Officers shouted. Doors slammed. The man in the gray suit smiled faintly. "Looks like the ground is shifting." Evelyn's breath came fast. "Is it enough?" "It's a start," he said, "but there's one problem." He lowered his voice. "Your husband didn't act alone, and the people behind him are already distancing themselves." As if summoned by his words, another alert flashed across the screen. "Breaking. Dr. Harlan found dead in his home. Apparent suicide." Evelyn stared in horror. "No," she whispered, "they're erasing witnesses." The man's expression hardened. "Which means time just ran out." He leaned closer. "If this goes to trial, they'll claim Dr. Harlan acted alone, a rogue doctor. A tragic mistake." Evelyn clenched her fists. "Then we don't let it be a trial," she said quietly. The man raised an eyebrow. "What are you suggesting?" Evelyn looked up, eyes burning with something new. "Resolve. We expose everything," she said. "All of it, at once, before they can bury anyone else." Somewhere far away, a phone vibrated on a glass table. A message appeared on the screen: "She's still fighting." A reply came seconds later: "Then end it publicly." The next morning, Evelyn was released on bail and handed a subpoena that would force her to face the people who had tried to kill her, live, in front of the entire nation. The courtroom didn't feel real. Cameras lined the walls. Reporters filled every bench. Outside, crowds pressed against barricades, shouting opinions they had already decided on. Evelyn sat at the witness table, hands folded tightly in her lap, heart pounding so hard she was sure the microphones could hear it. Across the room, her husband entered, not in handcuffs, not defeated. He wore a tailored suit and a familiar expression, calm, composed, confident. The same face he'd worn at the funeral. The same face he'd worn when he whispered that she was never supposed to wake up. Their eyes met. For a fraction of a second, his mask slipped, then it was gone. "Do you swear to tell the truth?" the clerk asked. "I do," Evelyn said. Her voice didn't shake. The prosecutor stood. "Mrs. Carter, can you tell the court what you remember about the night you were hospitalized?" Evelyn inhaled slowly. She spoke about the study, the open safe, the payments, the doctor's name. She described the poison, the paralysis, the darkness, the sound of dirt hitting wood while she was still conscious. The courtroom went silent. Somewhere in the crowd, someone began to cry. "And after you survived," the prosecutor continued, "what happened next?" "They tried again," Evelyn said, "in the hospital with a higher dose." She turned her head and looked directly at her husband. "He authorized it." A murmur spread through the room. The defense attorney leapt to his feet. "Objection, speculation." The judge raised a hand. "Overruled. The witness will continue." The prosecutor tapped the screen beside him. The ledger appeared, payment trails, digital signatures, the phrase "initiate credibility collapse" highlighted in red. "Do you recognize this document?" he asked. Evelyn nodded. "It's his." The defense shifted tactics. "Mrs. Carter," the attorney said smoothly, "isn't it true that you had access to these accounts? That you could have staged all of this?" Evelyn didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her pocket. The judge frowned. "What is that?" Evelyn placed a small recorder on the table. "My insurance," she said. She pressed play. Her husband's voice filled the courtroom. "You were never supposed to wake up. This time there won't be a mistake." The room erupted. The judge slammed the gavel. "Order!" Evelyn's husband stood abruptly. "This is illegal. That recording is authenticated," the prosecutor said. "Time-stamped, verified." For the first time, panic surfaced openly on her husband's face. But then he smiled, a slow, unsettling smile. "Even if you believe her," he said calmly, addressing the room, "you'll never connect this to anyone else. No board, no investors, no partners." He looked at Evelyn. "You're alone." That was when the doors at the back of the courtroom opened. Dr. Mara Ellison walked in, followed by federal agents. "You're wrong," she said clearly. "She's not." She handed the judge a thick folder. "Independent audits, international transfers, names that don't appear in your ledgers because they paid to stay hidden." The judge's face hardened as he flipped through the pages. Evelyn's husband sat down slowly. For the first time since this began, he looked small. But Evelyn felt no relief yet, because she knew something they didn't. Men like him didn't go down quietly. They pulled others with them. As the judge called for an immediate recess, a warning alert flashed on Dr. Ellison's phone. Someone tied to the case had vanished, taking secrets that could collapse everything. The courtroom emptied fast, too fast. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras surged forward. Guards formed a wall around Evelyn as she was escorted into a side room, her ears still ringing with the echo of her husband's recorded voice. "You were never supposed to wake up." Dr. Ellison followed, her phone clenched tightly in her hand. "They just pulled surveillance," she said under her breath. "One of the names on that folder, Marcus Vale, never checked out of his hotel." Evelyn's stomach dropped. "Who is he?" "A financial intermediary," Dr. Ellison replied. "He moved money between hospitals, shell companies, and media firms. If he talks, this whole structure collapses." The detective stepped in. "We sent agents to his last known address. The room was wiped, laptop gone, passport missing." Evelyn closed her eyes. "They got to him first." Outside the courthouse, her husband was being led to a secure vehicle. He looked calm again, too calm for a man facing prison. As the car door opened, he leaned toward his lawyer. "Make sure Vale stays lost," he said quietly. Across the city, in a rundown motel on the edge of the industrial district, Marcus Vale stared at the television bolted to the wall. Evelyn's face filled the screen. "Miracle survivor takes the stand." He wiped sweat from his forehead. "They found me," he muttered. A knock sounded at the door. 3 sharp taps, not police. He knew that instinctively. He grabbed his phone, fingers trembling, and opened a draft email he'd never had the courage to send. "If anything happens to me, another knock." Harder. He attached a file, small, compressed, deadly. A full transfer map. Names, dates. Instructions. He hit send. The door exploded inward. Back at the courthouse safe room, Evelyn sat alone, staring at her hands. "Mrs. Carter," an agent said gently, "we need to move you now." "Why?" she asked. He didn't answer. Dr. Ellison's phone buzzed again. She opened the email, her breath caught. "He sent it," she whispered. "Marcus Vale sent it." "Sent what?" Evelyn asked. Dr. Ellison looked up, eyes blazing. "Everything." At that exact moment, a news alert lit up screens across the city. Breaking. Key financial witness Marcus Vale found dead. Authorities report suspected homicide. Evelyn felt the air leave her lungs. "They killed him," she said. "Yes," Dr. Ellison replied quietly. "But not before he told us where to look." Agents flooded the room. Orders were shouted. Phones rang nonstop. The case had just shifted from defense to attack. Because now they didn't just have proof of attempted murder. They had proof of a system built to erase people. Evelyn stood up, her fear sharpening into something dangerous. "Then we finish this," she said. Dr. Ellison nodded. "We will. But understand this, once we move, there's no going back." Evelyn looked at the door, at the guards, at the world waiting outside. "They already buried me once," she said. "They don't get another chance." As federal raids began across the city, Evelyn received a final message from an unknown number, one sentence that revealed how close the danger still was. The phone vibrated once, just once. Evelyn stared at the screen like it might explode. "Unknown number, you survived the Coffin, you won't survive the truth." Her pulse spiked. "They know where I am," she said quietly. The agent beside her stiffened. "How?" "I don't know," Evelyn replied, "but this isn't a bluff." Dr. Ellison took the phone, already scanning the message headers. "It bounced through 3 countries," she said. "Professional routing. This isn't your husband." Evelyn swallowed. "Then it's the people above him." Outside, the city had shifted into a different rhythm. Unmarked vehicles tore through intersections. Federal warrants were executed simultaneously across hospitals, media firms, and financial offices tied to the ledger Marcus Vail had sent. For the first time, the machine was being forced into the light. But machines didn't die easily. In a private airstrip 2 hours away, a jet sat with its engines warming. A man adjusted his cufflinks as he read updates on a tablet. "Vail is dead," his assistant said. "But the data is live." The man frowned. "Then we accelerate." Back in protective custody, Evelyn was escorted into a secured conference room. A large screen flickered on, displaying a web of names and connections, far larger than she'd imagined. Dr. Ellison pointed to the center. "Your husband was a node, not the core." "So he was disposable," Evelyn said. "Yes," the detective replied, "and that makes him dangerous." As if summoned by the words, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Raised voices, running footsteps, a guard burst in. "We've got a problem. Your husband's legal team just filed an emergency motion." "For what?" Evelyn asked. "Temporary release," the guard said. "On medical grounds." Evelyn felt ice crawl up her spine. "He's sick now." "No," Dr. Ellison said sharply. "He's running." At that moment, a live feed appeared on the screen. Evelyn's husband, pale, composed, standing at a podium outside a hospital. "My wife has suffered a breakdown," he said calmly. "This entire ordeal is a tragic misunderstanding fueled by rogue actors." Evelyn's hands curled into fists. "He's lying again," she whispered. "He's reframing," Dr. Ellison corrected. "If he controls the story long enough, doubt creeps back in." On the screen, a reporter asked, "Are you saying your wife fabricated the attempted murder claims?" Evelyn's husband didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said, "and I forgive her." Something inside Evelyn snapped. "He's going to destroy what's left of the truth," she said. "If people believe him again." "They won't," Dr. Ellison said. "Not after this." She clicked a key. Another screen appeared, a scheduled data release, time-stamped, immutable, Marcus Vail's full archive set to publish automatically across international servers. "What if they stop it?" Evelyn asked. "They can't," Dr. Ellison replied. "But they can try to distract." As if on cue, the building shook. A distant boom echoed through the streets. Alarms wailed. An agent rushed in, breathless. "Explosion downtown, financial district." One of the firms tied to the ledger. Evelyn's heart raced. "They're erasing evidence." "And sending a message," the detective said grimly. Evelyn looked back at the first message on her phone. "You won't survive the truth." She lifted her chin. "Then let the truth be loud," she said. What Evelyn didn't know yet was that the data release would expose a name so powerful, it would force the entire case out of the courts and into global headlines. The countdown timer hit 0 o'clock. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the screen refreshed, and the world tilted. Every major network cut to breaking news at once. Headlines flooded social media faster than anyone could read them. Global alert. Encrypted files expose international medical cartel. Evelyn stood frozen as the name appeared at the top of the release. Not her husband, not Dr. Harlan, someone far bigger, Adrian Wolf, philanthropist, healthcare visionary, the man whose face smiled down from hospital wings, research grants, and charity galas around the world. He funds half the private medical boards in this country, the detective whispered, and several outside it. Dr. Ellison's jaw tightened, which is why no one ever touched him. The data spread like fire. Payment trails tied Wolf's foundation to experimental treatments, non-disclosure payouts to families, false death certifications across 3 countries, and a familiar phrase appeared again and again in internal messages. If the subject resists, initiate credibility collapse. Evelyn felt dizzy. This wasn't about me, she said slowly. I was just convenient. Yes, Dr. Ellison replied. You were proof the system failed. Across the city and across the ocean, doors slammed shut. Phones were destroyed, servers wiped. Private jets scrambled, but it was too late. Once data went global, it stopped belonging to anyone. In a luxury apartment overlooking the river, Adrian Wolf watched the news without expression. So, he said calmly, she lived. Yes, his assistant replied. And the ledger is authentic. Wolf nodded once. Then we pivot. Sir, we don't deny, Wolf said. We redefine. Minutes later, his statement went live. Adrian WOLFE. Any actions taken were part of unregulated research aimed at saving lives. Any harm caused was unintended. Evelyn watched the clip, anger boiling in her chest. He's calling murder research, she said. And people will believe him, the detective replied. Some already do. Outside, protesters clashed. Some demanded justice. Others held signs reading science requires sacrifice. The world was splitting right down the middle. Evelyn's phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a threat, it was a location pin. Attached message, if you want the truth that ends him, come alone. Dr. Ellison read it and shook her head. It's a trap. I know, Evelyn said. You can't go, the detective insisted. You're the key witness. Evelyn looked up, eyes steady. No, she said. I'm the loose end. She stood, feeling something unfamiliar settle into place. Control. They've tried to bury me, she continued. They've tried to silence me, discredit me, erase me. She picked up her phone. But they still think I'm afraid. Dr. Ellison grabbed her arm. Evelyn smiled faintly. They taught me something important. What? Dr. Ellison asked. Evelyn met her eyes. The truth only scares them when it's personal. She walked toward the door as alarms echoed faintly in the distance. Somewhere, someone had decided the final move, and Evelyn was walking straight into it. As Evelyn headed toward the pinned location, she didn't know that the meeting waiting for her wasn't a trap to kill her, but a confession powerful enough to bring down a man the world thought untouchable. The location pin led Evelyn to an abandoned waterfront clinic, once a state-funded medical center, shut down years ago after a budget restructuring. Now it stood hollow against the gray water, windows dark, doors chained, except one. Unlocked, Evelyn stepped inside alone. Every instinct told her this was a mistake. Her heartbeat echoed too loudly in her ears. The air smelled of rust and antiseptic ghosts. Hello, she called. Lights flickered on. A man sat at the far end of the hallway, slumped in a wheelchair. Not Adrian Wolf, someone smaller, broken. When he looked up, Evelyn recognized him instantly. Her husband's former legal advisor. The man who had drafted the shell contracts. The man who had vanished weeks ago. You came, he said hoarsely. Evelyn didn't move. You said you had the truth, he laughed weakly. I have what's left of it. She noticed his hands shaking. Track marks along his arm, a tremor that wasn't fear, it was withdrawal. They don't need me anymore, he continued. Wolf doesn't clean up loose ends, he lets them rot. Why contact me? Evelyn asked. Because you lived, he said simply, and because you're already dead to them. He reached into his coat and slid a small recorder across the floor with his foot. Every meeting, every instruction, years of it. Evelyn's breath caught. Why give this to me? Because I want it heard, he said. Not buried in evidence rooms, not settled quietly. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. They're coming, Evelyn said. He nodded. Good. She hesitated. If I take this, you know what happens. I know, he replied, but there's one thing you should hear first. He pressed a button on his chair. The recorder clicked on. Adrian Wolf's voice filled the empty clinic. If she survives, destroy her credibility. If that fails, make her death instructive. Evelyn's knees weakened. The advisor met her eyes. He never planned to stop. Footsteps thundered outside. The man leaned back, exhausted. Go. Let them find me. Evelyn picked up the recorder, hands steady now. As she turned to leave, his voice followed her down the hallway. Make them hear it. She stepped outside just as unmarked vehicles screeched to a halt on the opposite side of the building. She didn't run. She walked straight into the night, carrying a confession that could collapse an empire. What Evelyn didn't know yet was that the recording she carried would be played within hours, and once the world heard it, there would be no place left for Adrian Wolf to hide. The recording went live at 9:00 p.m. No press conference. No edits. No filters. Just a raw audio file uploaded simultaneously to independent journalists, international watchdogs, and public archives that couldn't be erased. Evelyn watched from a secure room as Adrian Wolf's voice filled screens across the world. Calm, measured, cold. If she survives, destroy her credibility. If that fails, make her death instructive. There was no context to hide behind. No scientific language. No legal escape. Just intent. The reaction was immediate. Markets froze. Foundations suspended operations. Hospitals bearing Wolf's name removed signage overnight. Governments issued statements within hours, not of denial but of distance. By midnight, Adrian Wolf was no longer a visionary. He was a liability. Evelyn sat quietly as updates scrolled past. International warrant issued. Assets frozen across 3 continents. Multiple arrests made in medical fraud investigation. Dr. Ellison stood beside her, eyes tired but bright. It's over, she said softly. Evelyn shook her head. No, it's finished. Outside, crowds gathered again, but this time the signs were different. We believed you. Survivors deserve justice. Truth is louder than power. In a detention facility miles away, Evelyn's husband sat alone, staring at a blank wall as the news replayed on loop. He wasn't angry, he wasn't afraid, he was empty. The system he trusted had moved on without him. Evelyn never saw him again. Months passed, trials followed, long, brutal public, doctors testified, executives confessed. Families finally learned the truth about deaths they'd been told were natural. Evelyn testified once more, but this time she wasn't fighting to be believed. She was being listened to. When it was over, she didn't return to her old life. That life had ended in a coffin. Instead, she stood at a podium months later, addressing a room full of survivors, advocates, and journalists. I was buried while breathing, she said. Not because I was weak, but because someone thought I was expendable. She paused. I wasn't. The applause wasn't loud, it was heavy, earned. That night, alone at home, Evelyn opened a small wooden box. Inside was the burial dress she'd worn. She folded it carefully and placed it in the fire. As the flames took hold, she felt something loosen inside her chest. Fear, finally, letting go. She stepped back and whispered the words that had once terrified her. I lived. And this time the world heard it. If this story moved you, stay with this channel. Stories like this matter, because silence protects power but attention protects people. Follow, share, and comment, because the next story might be someone's truth waiting to be heard.